Hello kids, welcome to the Dream Journey. Today we are going to tell a new story about a little girl named Lina and a tiny paper boat that took her somewhere most people only go when their eyes are closed. Outside, the rain is dripping from every leaf and rooftop, and the windows are covered in silvery streaks. Lina sits by the window with her elbows on the wooden sill, watching the world melt into gray. It's the kind of rain that smells like old books and sleepy days. She sighs and reaches for a blank sheet of paper from her coloring notebook. It's not fancy paper, just the ordinary kind, soft at the edges from where her cat had chewed it once. With careful fingers, she begins to fold. One crease. Then the tricky triangle fold she always forgets. Lina hums as she works. The rain taps the glass, keeping time like a gentle metronome. Slowly the shape takes form. A little paper boat. Its prow proud and its sail a little lopsided. She gives it a tap, and it wobbles but doesn't tip over. "There," she says softly. "You look like you want to go somewhere." The room is dim, except for the bedside lamp that casts a warm puddle of golden light over her hands. She holds the boat up and studies it. Something about it feels special, like it's waiting for her to say something more. So Lina leans in close, cups her hands around it like she's telling a secret, and whispers, "Your name is Windcatcher." A breeze stirs the curtains, just for a second. She sets Windcatcher beside the flower pot on her windowsill and watches the water roll down the glass, thinking nothing more of it. But the paper feels warmer than it should. The rain had settled into a rhythm now, soft and steady like the heartbeat of the afternoon. Lina watched the droplets dance down the glass, each one racing the others to the sill before vanishing into tiny rivulets. The world beyond her window was a blur of gray trees and puddle-patched rooftops. She stepped back and looked at her little creation. The paper boat sat exactly where she'd placed it, beside the clay flower pot that held a sleepy little fern. Its sharp folds still held strong despite the humid air, and its white paper gleamed faintly under the lamplight. It looked like it could sail away at any moment. Lina leaned in again, this time not to whisper, but just to look. The name she had given it, Windcatcher, still lingered on her tongue. Somehow, naming it made it feel real, like giving a dream a spine. She tapped the windowsill gently. "You stay right there, okay?" she said with mock sternness. "No floating off without me." The curtain moved slightly again. Not a full breeze, just the ghost of one. It lifted the edge of the fabric and gave the paper boat a tiny nudge, just enough to make it tilt. Lina blinked. She stepped closer, watching as it settled back into place. Maybe it was the breeze, or maybe the boat had listened. She glanced toward her bed, where her book lay open to the same page as last night, and her nightlight flickered gently in the corner. Her room smelled like clean paper and cinnamon, from the candle her mom had lit earlier. She took one last look at the boat and smiled. Then, quietly, she said it again like a promise. "Windcatcher." The boat stayed still, but somehow it heard her. That night, Lina climbed under the covers as the rain softened into mist. Her room was wrapped in quiet shadows, broken only by the golden circle of her nightlight. The world felt smaller, gentler, like everything outside had been tucked in too. She curled beneath her blanket, the kind with the frayed edges and tiny embroidered moons, and stared at the ceiling. Her eyelids drooped, but her thoughts lingered on the paper boat. Windcatcher, still folded tight on the windowsill. Somewhere between waking and sleep, Lina heard it. Creak. Creak. Not loud, not startling, just the kind of sound a rocking chair might make in an empty room. But there was no rocking chair. Only the window. And the boat. She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. Creak. The noise came again. Her eyes drifted toward the window. The curtain fluttered gently, though the window was closed. The flower pot was still there. So was the photo frame. And the boat. It had turned. Not a lot. Just enough that its pointed nose now faced the room instead of the glass. Its tiny paper sail lifted, like it was catching wind that wasn't there. Lina's breath caught. She knew she was dreaming. She had to be. The room shimmered around the edges now, like it had been dipped in water. The floor rippled like soft cloth. She swung her legs out of bed, toes touching not wood, but something strange and smooth and cool. She looked down. Her bedroom floor had vanished. In its place flowed a sea, not of water, but of deep blue velvet stitched with stars. Gentle waves lapped at the legs of her nightstand. The boat, now larger, bobbed gently on the tide, waiting. Lina's heart fluttered. The paper boat had come to life, and it was calling her aboard. Lina blinked again, her breath shallow with wonder. The paper boat wasn't small anymore. It floated just a few feet from her bed, gently rocking on a sea that shimmered like soft velvet stitched with constellations. The boat still looked like paper, its folds perfect, its seams sharp, but it was now large enough for her to climb into. Its sail swayed slightly, although there was no wind. Windcatcher. The name echoed quietly in her mind, like someone had whispered it far away. She stepped forward, one bare foot pressing into the dreamy tide. It wasn't cold, not exactly. It felt like dipping her foot into a pool of stars. Cool, tingly, but not wet. The water gave slightly under her steps, like walking on memory. The boat drifted closer, nudged by a current that seemed to know she was ready. Lina placed her hands on the rim and pulled herself in. The paper didn't crumple or tear. It held her weight perfectly, as though it had always been meant for this moment. Inside, the boat was simple. Smooth floor, curved sides, a single glowing lantern tied to the mast. It gave off a soft golden light that danced across Lina's face as she sat down. Everything around her was quiet, except the gentle shush of the dream sea below. The world beyond her bedroom faded entirely. Now, above her, the sky had no ceiling. It was endless, inky, and alive with stars that pulsed softly, like they were breathing with her. And sound. Not creaking this time. Music. A low, humming tune rose from the boat itself, like a lullaby played on wind and paper. It wrapped around her like a warm scarf, and the boat began to glide forward, slow at first, then gently faster. They were sailing through dreams. Lina blinked again, her breath shallow with wonder. The paper boat wasn't small anymore. It floated just a few feet from her bed, gently rocking on a sea that shimmered like soft velvet stitched with constellations. The boat still looked like paper, its folds perfect, its seams sharp, but it was now large enough for her to climb into. Its sail swayed slightly, although there was no wind. Windcatcher. The name echoed quietly in her mind, like someone had whispered it far away. She stepped forward, one bare foot pressing into the dreamy tide. It wasn't cold, not exactly. It felt like dipping her foot into a pool of stars. Cool, tingly, but not wet. The water gave slightly under her steps, like walking on memory. The boat drifted closer, nudged by a current that seemed to know she was ready. Lina placed her hands on the rim and pulled herself in. The paper didn't crumple or tear. It held her weight perfectly, as though it had always been meant for this moment. Inside, the boat was simple. Smooth floor, curved sides, a single glowing lantern tied to the mast. It gave off a soft golden light that danced across Lina's face as she sat down. Everything around her was quiet, except the gentle shush of the dream sea below. The world beyond her bedroom faded entirely. Now, above her, the sky had no ceiling. It was endless, inky, and alive with stars that pulsed softly, like they were breathing with her. And sound. Not creaking this time. Music. A low, humming tune rose from the boat itself, like a lullaby played on wind and paper. It wrapped around her like a warm scarf, and the boat began to glide forward, slow at first, then gently faster. They were sailing through dreams. The boat moved without sails or oars, but with purpose, as if the stars themselves were tugging gently at its corners. Lina sat still, eyes wide, listening to the paper hull whisper secrets in a language she almost understood. The sea beneath them glowed softly, like someone had spilled stardust across velvet. The waves weren't waves at all, not really. They rolled like dreams, smooth, slow, deep. Each crest sparkled for a moment, then faded like a thought half remembered. Around them, strange things drifted past. A pillow as big as a rowboat bobbed by, its corners damp from imaginary spray. It snored softly, sending little ripples through the sea. Farther out, a patch of blankets floated together like a miniature island, stitched with scenes of castles and clouds, all gently rising and falling with the tide. Lina leaned over the edge of the boat, watching her reflection. It wasn't just her face she saw, it was her sleeping face. Eyes closed, mouth slightly parted. She blinked. The reflection didn't. It just lay there in the water, dreaming peacefully. She shivered slightly, not from cold, but from the wonder of it all. Above her, the sky continued to pulse, stars blinking in soft patterns, constellations rearranging themselves into shapes she half recognized from bedtime stories. Fox, kite, cradle. Windcatcher creaked gently, as if pleased with the journey. Then, as they rounded a curve in the dream sea, though no map marked the turn, Lina saw it. A horizon of clouds ahead, lit from within by soft moonlight, casting a golden path over the water. She whispered, "Where are we going?" The boat gave no answer, but a new sound met her ears, like yawns carried on the wind, and lullabies sung by waves. They were entering the sea of sleep. As Windcatcher sailed deeper into the sea of sleep, the waters grew even softer, the waves slower, and the air heavier with hush. Everything felt quiet here, not empty but full of calm. It was the kind of quiet that made you breathe slower without noticing. Lina leaned over the edge of the boat and spotted something ahead. Islands. But not rocky or sandy islands, no. These were made of pillows. Dozens of them, floating like gentle clouds, each one different. Some were small and round, others long and flat. A few were stacked on top of each other, forming sleepy towers that rocked gently with the waves. As they passed the first, Lina saw a rabbit curled up on top of it, snoring with its ears folded neatly over its eyes. On another, a fox was wrapped in a blanket, its tail twitching softly as it dreamed. A squirrel slept curled around a pencil, murmuring something about spelling words. The animals didn't wake as the boat passed. They simply shifted and sighed. Windcatcher drifted between the pillow aisles, brushing their edges. A few feathers floated through the air, catching the lantern's golden glow as they twirled down like sleepy snowflakes. One island had a sign poking out from its side. The letters were wobbly and hand-drawn. "Naps welcome." Lina giggled. Felt good to giggle here. Like the kind of laugh you let out after climbing into a warm bed. She reached out and caught a passing feather. It dissolved in her hand into a puff of cool, comforting air. "I could stay here forever," she whispered. The boat didn't answer, but it rocked a little more gently, as if agreeing. Then in the distance, something rumbled, deep and slow. A new sound on the horizon. Something was snoring bigger than any pillow could hold. The snore came again, louder now, deep and rolling like thunder heard from underwater. It wasn't frightening, just immense. It made the pillow isles tremble slightly, sending ripples through the dream sea. Lina looked ahead, standing carefully in the paper boat as it drifted around a curve in the water. And then she saw it. Whale. But not just any whale. This one was vast, stretching wider than a hill and longer than her entire neighborhood street. It floated on the surface of the dream sea, sound asleep, its body rising and falling with each monumental breath. Its skin was dark blue speckled with pale stars, like someone had painted the night sky onto its back. Glowing barnacles clung to its sides, twinkling softly, and with every snore, bubbles rose from its blowhole, each one shimmering with a different color. One bubble floated close to Windcatcher and popped quietly. Inside had been a tiny scene. Lina glimpsed it just for a moment. A treehouse made of marshmallows, spinning slowly like a mobile. "What is this place?" she whispered, but softly, not to wake the whale. Windcatcher creaked in response and slowed its pace, gliding respectfully around the massive creature. As they passed along its side, Lina could hear its dreams. Not words exactly, but feelings, a lullaby of low, echoing hums. Depth, timeless drifting. The whale snored again, this time causing a few floating pillows to bump gently into each other like sleepy clouds. Lina smiled. "He must be dreaming the dreams too big for anyone else," she murmured. Just then one of the whale's eyes opened, just a crack. A calm, ancient eye the color of moonlight peered at her. It didn't blink. It just looked, and then slowly closed again, trusting her to pass by. Windcatcher continued on, deeper into the dream. Beyond the slumbering whale, the sea began to change. The waves smoothed, and the stars above seemed to draw closer. Not brighter, just nearer, like they were lowering themselves to watch quietly. The lantern on Windcatcher flickered, then steadied again, casting soft ripples of golden light across the boat's deck. Lina noticed the air had grown lighter, filled with a faint shimmer, as if it was full of slow-moving snowflakes that never quite touched the ground. Ahead stood a tall structure rising out of the sea, glowing like a pearl in the darkness. Lighthouse, but not like any she'd seen in books. This one was made entirely of light. Its spiraling tower seemed sculpted from moonbeams and glass, shifting gently with the rhythm of the dream sea. It didn't blink like real lighthouses do. Instead, it pulsed, a slow, steady rhythm like a heartbeat, casting a calming glow that stretched in soft beams across the horizon. Windcatcher guided itself toward it without a sound. As they drew closer, Lina could see that the base of the lighthouse wasn't made of rock but of floating memories. Toy blocks, a spinning top, a blanket she hadn't seen since she was 3. They floated in a quiet orbit, held in place by the lighthouse's gentle pull. When they passed under its light, everything went silent. Not the empty kind of silent, the whole kind. Like the world had taken a long, deep breath and held it. Lina looked up through the center of the lighthouse beam and saw images dancing in the light. A little girl hugging her dad, a bubble floating out of reach, a firefly in a jar. Dreams. Not hers. Not yet. Or maybe once. The lighthouse of moonlight had no door, no stairs, no keeper. Simply watched. And remembered. As Windcatcher drifted onward, the light from the moonbeam lighthouse softened behind them. The sea darkened once more, but not in a frightening way. It became cozy, like the underside of a warm blanket. Lina sat quietly in the boat, her fingers brushing the edges of the deck. The waves had grown slower again, and the stars above now pulsed more gently, like a lullaby was being hummed somewhere just out of earshot. Then she saw it. A glowing, puffy cloud floated down from the sky, but it didn't pass by like the others had. It stopped just ahead of the boat, bobbing softly on the surface of the sea. Its edges shimmered with a faint pink hue, and its middle pulsed with a dim golden glow. Lina leaned forward. The boat slowed. The cloud felt familiar. She stood and reached out, one hand hovering just above the soft surface. The cloud didn't vanish. It didn't float away. Stayed. And as she touched it, the memory came rushing in. She had seen this cloud before. A long time ago. Maybe when she was 3, maybe younger. In a dream where she had been so small she could barely walk. She had hugged a cloud just like this one. It had cradled her like a pillow made of sky, humming quietly in her ear as she fell asleep. She hadn't remembered it until now. Tears welled in her eyes. Not sad ones but warm ones. The kind that come when something lost comes home again. Lina climbed gently from the boat and onto the cloud. It didn't sink. It didn't shift. It simply held her. She wrapped her arms around it and buried her face in the soft mist, breathing in the scent of sugar and starlight. The cloud, it seemed, remembered her too. Lina stayed on the cloud for a while, feeling its warmth soak into her arms like sunlight through a blanket. When she finally climbed back into Windcatcher, her cheeks were damp, but her heart felt lighter, as if the cloud had returned a piece of her she didn't know was missing. The boat rocked gently, as if it understood. They continued on, the sea stretching before them like a dark ribbon trimmed in light. That was when she saw it. Above her, not in the sky but floating just ahead, shimmered a single star. Not part of any constellation. Not one of the faraway dots scattered in the heavens. No, this one hovered close enough to see its soft edges flickering, like a candle flame held too long. Lina's breath caught. She knew this star. It had visited her in a dream years ago, when she was very small, before she could even read. She tried to catch it. It had danced just above her fingers, giggling like a bell. She remembered jumping on her bed, laughing, reaching for it, and then waking with empty hands and tangled sheets. And here it was again. The star dipped and twirled, teasing her once more. It glided in slow loops around the boat, just out of reach. It pulsed with warm light, a curious, playful shimmer. Lina leaned forward, hand outstretched. She stood carefully on the edge of the boat. "Come here," she whispered, voice trembling with wonder. The star hovered, paused, then zipped just beyond her fingertips. She laughed. Then, for a moment, the star came close, almost brushing her hand. It flickered warmly against her skin like a memory you suddenly remember in perfect detail. And then, with a twinkle, it danced away again. Not mocking, just playful. As if it were saying, "You'll find me again." Windcatcher floated forward, leaving the laughing star behind. But Lina didn't feel like she'd lost it. She felt like she'd met it again. The dream sea widened again, opening into a kind of soft, endless plaza where the waves calmed to a still hush, and Windcatcher came to a gentle stop. Lina looked around. To one side, lights flickered in the dark. Not stars, not lanterns, but something spinning slowly in the air. She stood up in the boat and saw them clearly. A carousel. Not just any carousel. It floated above the water, held aloft by quiet wind and drifting music. Its poles weren't metal but made of winding ribbons, and its canopy shimmered like clouds at sunrise. Each animal on the carousel spun slowly, without a rider. They weren't horses alone, they were dream creatures too. A winged cat, a giraffe made of stitched socks, a whale small enough to perch on a pole. A dragon blinked lazily, trailing mist as it turned. Lina stared, enchanted. The music was soft, the kind you hum without knowing it. She whispered, "Can we go?" Windcatcher gently nudged her forward, and with a blink, she found herself standing on the carousel's floor. though she didn't remember stepping off the boat. The carousel continued to spin, slowly, like time on a sleepy afternoon. As it turned, each creature she passed seemed to whisper something. Not words, but laughter. Familiar laughter. Her laughter. She heard herself as a baby, giggling in a high chair. She heard her voice at 5, pretending to be a pirate. She heard her laugh from a summer picnic she'd forgotten, chasing bubbles barefoot. Tears welled again, but not from sadness. These were echoes she hadn't known were still inside her. The carousel turned, and the dragon's eye blinked knowingly. As the ride slowed, a final whisper came, her mother's voice saying, "Hold on to the good ones, love. Even the small ones." Windcatcher was waiting when she stepped off, bobbing quietly. Windcatcher glided forward once more, its paper sail catching a breeze that Lina couldn't feel but somehow knew was there. She sat quietly now, wrapped in the warmth of remembered laughter, her head resting gently against the side of the boat. Then, just ahead, she noticed something strange floating on the surface of the sea. It was flat, like a scroll. But as the boat drew closer, she saw that it was more than paper. It shimmered with a strange ink that shifted colors like oil on water. As Windcatcher approached, the object lifted itself from the sea, slowly like a page turning in a book, and unrolled in the air. Map. But not a map of lands or oceans. This one showed moments. She could see them, little drawings like constellations. Herself on a tricycle with a crown of daisies. A snow angel melting in the shape of a heart. Her very first dream, marked by a tiny cloud and a barely there smiley face. The map pulsed softly, responding to her breath. As she leaned closer, lines began to appear. Faint at first, then clearer, connecting memories like a constellation. She traced one with her finger and saw an image bloom. A picture book with a missing last page. She remembered it now. She'd cried because the story didn't end. And then she saw it, the center of the map. A little folded triangle. Paper boat. Windcatcher. The boat was there in all of them. Hidden in the background. In a puddle on a drawing, even folded on her bookshelf. It had always been near. "You've been part of my dreams all along," she whispered. The map curled back into itself like a sleepy yawn and drifted gently into Windcatcher's sail. The boat swelled just a little, as if remembering too. The stars above flickered slightly. Not like before. Not the gentle, sleepy twinkle of distant light. Whoa. These stars began to shift faster, like they were being blown by a wind that hadn't yet reached the sea. Lina looked up, uneasy. Windcatcher rocked once. Then again. Harder. The water beneath them darkened. No longer deep velvet, but swirling ink. The peaceful tide stirred restlessly, and waves began to rise. Not angry, but confused, like a dream unraveling too fast. Above them, the stars swirled into spirals, and the sky folded in on itself in strange slow-motion jerks. Windcatcher shuddered as a gust hit its sail, and suddenly, crumpled paper rained from the sky. Pieces of dreams. Old ones half remembered. Forgotten ones. Torn bits of ideas. Scribbled notes. Collapsed castles made of yarn. Paper crown folded wrong. The boat struggled to stay upright. Lina held onto the sides, eyes wide, heart thumping. Around her, the sea spun with broken thoughts and jumbled images, a thunderstorm of memory fragments. A crumpled drawing pasted itself to the sail. A baby's face, her face, laughing in finger paint. Another stuck to the mast, a crooked star she'd drawn for her mother. It wasn't scary exactly, but it was loud in that quiet dream kind of way where everything suddenly feels like too much. Windcatcher groaned. The waves surged higher. Lina closed her eyes and took a breath. In her mind she whispered, "You're still a boat. You're still Windcatcher. You've always brought me home. The boat tilted, then steadied. The sky's folding slowed. The paper rain softened, drifting like feathers. The sea began to hush again. Lina opened her eyes. Windcatcher was bruised but unbroken. Around them, the storm of crumpled thoughts dissolved into silver mist. And ahead, a stretch of calm waited. The sea once again was still. Windcatcher glided forward slowly, paper sails swaying as if exhaling. All around them the world had quieted. The sky, no longer spinning, had settled into a deep twilight, not fully dark, not quite light, the color of soft ink and distant lullabies. Lina sat in the boat with her knees pulled to her chest. Her heartbeat had steadied, the panic of the storm now a distant echo. The boat creaked gently as if sighing with her. They had entered a space between dreams. Here the sea wasn't sea at all anymore. It was smooth like glass, reflecting not stars but nothing. Not emptiness, something gentler, like a breath being held. Pause in the story. The sky above looked different too. It wasn't endless now, but close, as if the ceiling of the world had dropped lower to keep her company. Everything felt softer, rounder, as if the sharpness of waking life had been filed away. Lina let out a long breath and laid back in the boat. The paper didn't crunch. It molded beneath her like memory foam made from bedtime songs. She looked up. There were no stars now, only a faint swirl of cloud shapes slowly drifting across the dim sky. They didn't form anything. No dragons, no foxes, no kites. Just movement, just presence. The boat floated without aim, without urgency, just existing. Lina thought of her heartbeat, of how it had rushed during the storm, how it now matched the tiny creaks of the boat, the rhythm of floating. She could feel herself unwinding. Nothing chased her here. Nothing called. This was the in-between, the quiet hallway between dreams. A place of rest, where time curled up in the corner for a nap. She smiled softly, eyes closing. Windcatcher kept drifting, slow and sure. Time didn't move here, or if it did, it moved like a lullaby. But as Windcatcher floated forward once more, something new began to appear in the distance. First, just pinpricks of light. Then hundreds. Then thousands. Tiny lanterns. They bobbed on the surface of the dream sea like fireflies resting on lily pads, each glowing softly in a different color. Some flickered gently like candlelight. Others shimmered with soft pulses, as if breathing. A few blinked, hesitant, like they weren't sure if they were ready to shine. Lina sat up, eyes wide. The lantern stretched in all directions, a tide of floating lights. Not fast, not chasing, just drifting, arriving. Windcatcher eased among them, careful not to disturb their rest. Lina reached over the side of the boat and scooped one gently into her hands. It was warm, not hot, light as a bubble. Inside something moved, a small glowing shape. A memory. No, not quite. Hope. A lantern of what could be. Inside this one, she saw herself standing tall in front of a classroom, holding a book. Another floated by, glowing soft pink, and within it, her hands cupping a kitten's face, both of them blinking in surprise. Lina smiled. The lanterns weren't dreams of the past. They were dreams not yet dreamed. Wishes waiting. Possibilities like unopened letters. One by one the lights drifted past. Some were large and brilliant. Others were small and shy, flickering gently. She sat still, letting the tide carry them around her, through her. Not to collect or keep, just to witness. To know they were there. As Windcatcher sailed through the glowing tide, Lina leaned back and let the light kiss her cheeks, tiny warm suns against the coolness of the dream sea. She didn't chase them. She simply smiled and let them float. As the lanterns faded behind them, one by one dimming like lullabies settling into sleep, the sea began to shift once more. Not turbulent this time, just gently guiding, as if the world itself were drawing Windcatcher toward a final stop. The horizon glowed with soft lavender light. Not the sunrise, not the moon, something else. Ashore. Lina leaned forward, eyes wide. The boat slowed. The shoreline wasn't made of sand, but of soft threads, a beach of woven whispers. Gentle waves lapped against it with a sound like pages turning. The sand shimmered underfoot like the lining of an old coat. Familiar, comforting. Windcatcher came to rest. Lina stepped out. Her feet sunk slightly into the fabric shore. The breeze here was different. It carried voices. Not loud, not shouting. Just murmurs, fragments like the kind you hear when drifting off to sleep. She turned her head. Whispers rose from the ground. Little dream phrases she'd forgotten. My turn next. But I can fly too. The stars said yes. Each one floated up as a tiny ribbon of light, curling in the air before fading away. Here dreams had come to rest. Some were old and frayed. Some sparkled like they'd only just been let go. They drifted and settled like autumn leaves, piling into soft dunes of gentle memory. Lina crouched and picked up a whisper. It said, "You'll remember this when it matters." She held it to her heart. The air was warm here. Not from heat but from knowing. This place didn't want anything from her. Just wanted her to pause. To listen. Windcatcher waited patiently, its sail lowered. Lina looked up at the sky one last time. No stars, no clouds, only stillness, and the quiet hush of every dream ever dreamed. The air shimmered slightly, as if the very edge of the dream was near. Lina stood at the edge of the whispering shore, and Windcatcher waited behind her, bobbing softly in the shallow waves of quiet memory. The threads beneath her feet seemed to hum, not a song but a kind of remembering. She turned to the boat, ready to return. But before she stepped aboard, Windcatcher shifted. The sail glowed faintly, and the boat began to unfold. Not fall apart, unfold. The sides opened gently like petals, and from inside the paper folds, something peeked out. More paper. Thinner, older, the color of childhood. Lina stepped closer. The boat was made from something she recognized. A letter. No, a drawing. She leaned in and saw the lines. Her handwriting. Her tiny, shaky letters. Her stars with too many points. She remembered it suddenly. A note she'd written when she was 4 or 5, folded carefully, set on her windowsill one night. It had said something like, "Dear stars, if you're real, please write back." She'd waited a whole week. No reply. She had forgotten all about it, until now. This boat, Windcatcher, had been made from that note. It had taken her question, her wonder, and carried it all this way. Through sleep, through memory, through hope. Lina touched the folded paper gently. The ink had faded, but the stars she'd drawn were still there, lopsided and sweet. The boat creaked softly as if saying, "You wrote me." She smiled through tears. "You are the reply." Windcatcher pulsed once, glowing warmly, then folded itself back again, whole and waiting. Lina stepped in. The boat turned, pointing homeward. The journey wasn't over, but now she knew its beginning. She hadn't been called by the dream. She had called it. Windcatcher floated quietly now, its sail still glowing faintly from the memory it had revealed. Lina sat near the bow, her arms around her knees, watching as the whispering shore faded into the distance. It felt full. Not heavy, not sad, just full. Like a book that had reached its last chapter but didn't want to close just yet. The sea beneath them shimmered again, this time more like morning than night. The stars above had softened into a pale blush, and a light breeze stirred the sail with the sound of paper fluttering in a breeze. The boat began to turn. Not fast, not sharp, just a gentle arc, like a sigh made into movement. Lina watched the water and for a moment saw her reflection again, but it was different now. She wasn't sleeping. Her eyes were open, her face calm. There was a softness to her expression, like someone who had been heard, finally, after a very long time. Windcatcher circled once, a farewell loop, and then gently straightened. The sea around them began to dissolve. Not vanish, just blur. The stars, the sky, the sea. All of it started to fade like paint washed by water. The air grew lighter, thinner, like the surface of a bubble rising toward the sky. Windcatcher's glow grew warmer. And Lina, though she didn't know how, felt the pull of waking. She looked around one last time. There was no fear, no rush, just knowing. "Thank you," she whispered to the boat, "for coming back." The sail rippled once in response. As the world around her faded, she curled quietly into herself, resting her head on the edge of the boat. The paper beneath her felt like a hug, like home. And then, with one final breath, the dream gently folded away. Morning came quietly. No alarm, no rush, just the faintest shift in the air, the soft call of birds outside, and a golden haze that stretched across Lina's windowsill. She stirred beneath her blanket, the one with the tiny moons stitched along the hem. Her room was just as she had left it, soft, familiar, still holding the scent of paper and cinnamon from the night before. And there, on the windowsill, sat Windcatcher, exactly where she had placed it. Only now its paper looked different. A little wrinkled, a bit saggy along the folds. The tip of its bow held a single drop of dew, like a tear that hadn't quite fallen. It glistened in the morning light. Lina sat up slowly. Her hair was tousled, her cheeks warm from sleep, but her eyes were wide, not with confusion, but with the memory still fresh. She climbed out of bed and padded quietly across the room. Windcatcher didn't move. It was paper again. Just folded paper. Ordinary white, slightly yellowed from being touched too many times. But still she knew. She reached out and touched the tip, letting the drop of dew fall onto her fingertip. It was cold, real. She smiled. Outside, the rain had stopped. The world was damp and clean, and everything glowed with that special silent light that only comes after a night of rain and wonder. She didn't need to say anything. Not yet. Instead, she picked up the little boat, cradled it in her hands, and set it gently on her desk, right beside her stack of blank paper. She glanced out the window once more, the sky now wide and full of promise. Then, without a word, she turned and began to fold again. Lina sat at her desk, legs tucked beneath her, a new sheet of paper before her. The room was quiet but not empty. It hummed with a kind of gentle fullness, like a song remembered without needing to hum it. Windcatcher rested beside her, its damp edges curling just slightly as it dried in the golden morning air. She folded slowly, not because she had forgotten how, but because this time, she wanted to remember every crease. The paper whispered under her fingers, a soft rustle like leaves turning, like sails catching wind. Each fold brought a memory. The sleeping whale, the lighthouse of moonlight, the ribbon whispers on the shore. She pressed the final corner into place. A new paper boat. Smaller than Windcatcher. Neater. A little sharper at the edges. But still it felt right. She set it gently beside the old one. Two boats. Two dreams. She looked out the window. The sky was wide and blue now, but not just any blue. It was the blue from the dream sea. She could still feel it beneath her feet. Hear the lullaby of waves made from thought. Taste the quiet of the in-between. And deep inside, she knew something she hadn't before. Dreams weren't just places she visited. They were hers. Born from her questions, her memories, her hopes. And the paper boat. That was the proof. She didn't need sleep to sail anymore. She could set sail any time she wondered. Any time she folded something with care. Any time she listened to the quiet part of her heart. She smiled. Somewhere, in the sky or behind the clouds or deep within, a dream was waiting. Maybe it had wings. Maybe it had whiskers. Maybe it was shaped like a whisper. But she would find it. And Windcatcher, curled quietly beside her, would wait, always ready for another voyage.